which one is Wendy? What does Wendy do? She's a co-founder in this conference. I know, but what does she do outside of this?
Who's the education director, the education design director, excuse me, of Microsoft, is that his name is not Alex Gaines, even though he plays, it's Alex Gannis. So,
is this thing on? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, let's take a moment and be bored for a second. You know, we just had a couple of awesome presentations on how things are going faster and we're getting flooded with information. And it made me realize something, that we're taking less and less time to reflect. And this is really relevant to the presentation that I'm going to do right now. It's something that we're doing at Microsoft, which is in some ways counterintuitive, but at the same time very interesting to me, is that we are really trying to harness the power of being here and now. And I don't mean that digitally. Yeah. I mean being here and now, face to face. My presentation is called How Playful Learning is Disrupting Education for Good. And I mean that in two senses. I mean that in the sense of we're trying to do positive things, but also in the sense of transforming it forever. So a little bit about me. I've worn many hats over the years. I have been a computer engineer designing robotics for many, many years. After doing robotics, I really became interested in human beings and how human beings learn with technology. Because I found out that we've been trying for a long, long time to replicate the human brain with technology. And we keep failing, and in some ways that is awesome. And it's awesome because it speaks to the power of the human mind and of the human capacity. I became a learning scientist and a research scientist. I've also been a game designer for all those years, working with some of the folks here in the room, and I had the pleasure to work with people like Eric over there. Things like games for mechanic. Basically, taking games and making them a medium of expression. Taking games and using them to give tools to human beings to express their thoughts and to understand the way that people think when they actually play. And finally, maybe I should have put this one first. I started my career as an educator. I started my career teaching middle school, and I'm still an educator. I feel like every day of my life, working with game designers, working with learning scientists, working with engineers, I'm educating and being educated at the same time. So the agenda today, first I'm going to talk a little bit about how informal, this so-called informal learning is really reshaping the face of education. And how at the end of the day, all learning is going to end up becoming informal. And on why that is possible. Second, how at Microsoft Studios we're thinking about this space and using a concept that we're calling playful learning to contribute to the changes that are happening. We're going to talk about something that's really, really important to me, the importance of accessibility. How massive it is that we empower as many people as possible with the technology. And I'm going to talk about why in just a second. And then number 4, I'm going to give a little example of work that we've been doing with a product called Kodu Game Lab to encourage and engage children in becoming the STEM learners of the 21st century. So what's happening with informal learning and how is it related to formal learning? Well, in reality, the way that I see it is, I see it as a dam that is about to break. The dam of the structures of education. The current educational system, as we know it, was designed for an industrial age. And it was designed for a very pragmatic purpose. Let's keep youth from the streets and from killing each other in gangs. It was designed during an industrial era where the United States were experiencing this massive influx of immigrants. Immigrants that did not speak each other's language, that did not share each other's culture, and that more often than not ended in bloodshed. You remember the movie Gangs of New York? That's exactly how it was. The modern educational system was in many ways a way to abate that problem and at the same time build a common culture. However, technology has changed to such a dramatic level that bastion and that structure, like many other structures, are beginning to crack. Globalization, any government, any nation has three main forms of expenditure: health, education, and defense. Defense has been global since the Cold War. Whether we like it or not, we have a presence in tons of nations of the world. We maintain bases all over the world. And we have a deep, intertwined ecosystem at that level. Healthcare is going global, whether we like it or not. As information about pandemics becomes available, as we see the connections between flu starting in one country of the world and then moving all over the place, we are realizing that we cannot live in isolation. Education, whether we like it or not, is going that way. And what that means is a new model and a new way of thinking, not so much of education, but of learning. Some things that are really accelerating this concept are things like the semantic cloud. The fact that we now can aggregate content very, very quickly and very, very cheaply. Things like Khan Academy, BrainPop, or How Stuff Works are great examples of sites where people create content in technologies like YouTube, and then people aggregate them really quickly, filter them, and present them in a way that's digestible. Peer-to-peer communication, tools like Skype, are becoming really mainstream, where now I can be in a classroom, launch a Skype application, and teach anybody in any part of the world, and learn with them. Scalable distribution models, ebooks, just like we, and interactive books, just like our first presenter showed, mobile technologies, and formats like Udacity or Udemy that are actually creating coursework and creating educational content that is cheap, quickly distributable, and easily accessible as one content. And then finally, crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, making the Gen Y mode of operation, the social mode of operation, the mainstream way in which people learn. All these things, what they are doing is they are beginning to break down the walls of a system that is the last laboratory, the last great laboratory of the modern era. And that is the school ecosystem that still lives separated from the real world. Some of the challenges that we're going to see with this, however, are actually big, big challenges. Important challenges to think about. First of all, educational content is still by far the least accessible and the least user-centered content out there. Raise your hand if you ever took a class where you learned, let's take math, and you ask the question to yourself, why the hell am I doing this? When the hell am I going to use this? Why? Because we don't teach this in context. We are still teaching in schools in a very abstracted and disconnected way. It's usability. It's the notion of usability. How do we think of content, of educational content and educational messaging in a way that takes advantage of how the immediate consumer, which is the learner, learns? Second is organization of communities. We have, in education, still a very fragmented ecosystem. Within the United States, it's a great example of how there isn't a national curriculum. We have initiatives like the Common Core Standards, but the truth is that every state implements them however they want. And at the end of the day, what one learns in Mississippi is not equivalent to what one learns in Washington. More importantly, what is happening here is, as we realize the dramatic divide that exists between rich and poor, not only in this country, but in all countries in the world, and how that dramatic divide is increasing, we're realizing that it's the access to opportunity that is creating that fragmentation. Third is standards and assessment. How do we measure whether somebody is learning? By and large, we're still measuring whether somebody learns with anything, including technology, using standards from the 20th century. Multiple choice tests, SATs, etc., right? Any of you have taken those tests, you realize that it's all about regurgitating what somebody else thinks you should know, rather than actually telling people what you do know. We need a new way of thinking about assessments, a new way of thinking about what it means to learn and what it means to function effectively in a society that demands that at 13 years of age we're actively participating in the workforce. Just think about the implications of what the previous presentation says. How many of you think your 13-year-old as empowered with technology as your 13-year-old is, how many of you, your 13-year-old is ready to make an executive decision about having family? How many of you think that a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old has the wisdom to see the implications of taking drugs? And yes, children are being exposed to, the implications of 9/11 and war and so on and so forth. How many of your children have actually seen a child die in a war-torn region? The world is not a pretty place in that regard. But more importantly, the world is a world that requires wisdom, not only information. How do we create experiences that try to harness that? And how do we create experiences that allow for educational value that speaks to that generation, to a generation that is constantly connected, that wants to be constantly connected, but at the same time maintains some of the critical components that give us wisdom, mainly our family relationships. And finally, institutional changes. The family is changing. As you said, Gen X, we were the first generation product of divorce. Yes, we were raised by wolves. Yeah. And some of us survived. And some of us actually learned the hard lessons of what it means to have a parent that acts like a child. And some of us learned the hard lessons of what it means to feel like you're alone in the world because those around you are taught to compete with you, not to cooperate with you. There's a completely different way that we need to be thinking about this to be sustainable. How are we thinking about it? We're thinking about it by disrupting media. Disrupting what kids consume today. Because whether it is a Twitter feed, Facebook, television, Dora the Explorer, or Thomas the Tank Engine books, all of these things are part of the ecosystem that forms a child's mind. At the end of the day, media gives us tools to think with. Memes give us tools to think with. We're connected. We feel we're connected to others because we speak a common language that allows you to communicate with others, feel connection, and feel empowered to act with other people. Why does crowdfunding work? Because there's a common agreement in that generation, and it's not only that generation, because I know plenty of Gen Xers and baby boomers that are contributing to crowdfunding, that understand that cooperation is far more important than competition at the end of the day. So how do we transform this? Well, what we're saying is, can we take all these experiences and use interactivity, use the power of interactivity to make them truly family-oriented? And how does that start? Where does that start? Well, it starts with ultimate accessibility. Recently, we had a little experiment. At Microsoft, I'm part of a group, Kids and Lifestyle Entertainment. And what we are doing is we are literally creating experiments in children's entertainment. And one of our most awesome lessons recently learned was a title called Double Fine Happy Action Theater. For those of you who are familiar with Tim Schafer and Double Fine, he's one of the most creative and insane designers out there. But at the same time, something that really struck us with working with him was his motivation to make things better. Double Fine Happy Action Theater is a title that started out of his desire to engage his 3-year-old in play. Because he was finding that his peers had this, and well, this is awesome and enables people to do all sorts of cool things and move around and whatnot. It's still me facing a screen. And I am not face-to-face with other people. Any of you who have children, you know the fundamental importance in child development of social interaction. And that means immediate social interaction, not remote. I am not going to raise my baby on this. I need to raise my baby with other babies. My child needs to learn to know other people and that they exist. Happy Action Theater then is an experience that we created trying to use Kinect as a way to transform the living room once more into a social place, to bring people back face to face and have a meaningful experience. And the way that we did it is like this. I'm going to play a little trailer. What we did. Happy Action Theater, rather than being a game. I don't know what that means.
Donate $1 to preserve America's national parks by entering your UPC code at preservetheparks.com. Your code, your chance to make a difference.
Happy Action Theater are a series of interactive playscapes. Think about them as the digital toys of the 21st century. Up to 6 people can stand in front of Kinect and immediately jump into play. People as young as 3 years old. As long as they can move and see themselves on the screen, they can interact. This is what we call ultimate accessibility. It's being able to be invited into the play and to participate. But what's the most important learning thing about this? Well, we say, well, you know, there's no curriculum in it. That's not the point. The point is that we're actually bringing families together to play. We're inviting people to do what John Gans-Cooney requested a while ago, which is co-view with your child. One of the most important findings in learning with Sesame Street was the notion of co-viewing. When a parent views with the child learns more. Oh, what a surprise. Why? Because there's conversations around this. What we wanted to do was create a space of performance where parents and kids could be jumping. More importantly, when you see a 17-year-old, a core gamer, jumping and smiling like a silly child in front of this thing, you know that something magical has just happened. Totally recommend it if you're in your dorm and you have a beer with you. At the end of the day, what are the lessons that we learned out of this? Well, we came with this notion of playful learning with the idea that we wanted to encourage first play and have learning follow suit naturally from it. And so we learned that playful learning is powerful when it's embodied. And that means learning is powerful when I can connect it to my actions in the world, when I can connect the knowledge to the things I do. Playful learning is situated. It's very powerful to see parents having actual conversations with their child about why lava burns some things and not others when lava is flooding their living room. Playful learning is social. At the end of the day, it is engaging an older generation with a younger one. It is about grandpa and grandma being able to play with the 3-year-old as opposed to the 3-year-old being raised alone. It's not about a nanny. It's about a co-nanny. Playful learning is expressive. It's about taking the experience and being able to express yourself and give your own particular input into the experience and feeling rewarded from the fact that your input is valuable in the play. And finally, it is design. It has to be carefully crafted and thought for the audiences that we are designing or for the kinds of experiences that we want to create. As the previous presentation told us, Gen Y and Gen Z would much rather invest in an experience than in a product. Completely agree. We need to be creating experiences, not products. From this stemmed a second idea, which was, could we turn games, can we turn traditional television as we know it, with educational content? Let's think about a science documentary, right? A natural science documentary, into an engaging, playful learning experience. Well, what I'm going to show you in a second is the outcome of that little experiment. What I'm going to show you here is two examples of the format that I'm talking about. This is actually another product called Kinect Sesame Street TV. So it's not that I mentioned, so the ones that are outside. But essentially the idea, and this enables talks about the excitement and learning. Can we take Sesame Street and National Geographic documentaries, take that format and transform it into an interactive experience that is pleasant and fun for the whole family?
And National Geographic. By using Kinect, we're engaging interactively in those experiences in a way that's never been done before.
Over the course of many years, Sesame Street has worked on gaming platforms.
The idea is an idea that we call two-way television. If you think about Sesame Street, historically it's tried to do interactivity. The monsters invite a child to play, but there's always been a one-sided interactivity, right? I invite you to play, and well, if you play, that's great. If you don't play, well, show must go on. With Kinect, we have the ability to give a child the interactivity necessary to take the show in a different direction and to respond to the invitation by a monster. That demo is Grover inviting a kid to throw him a coconut because he needs to put him back in his box in order to count it. So a child can take Kinect, throw the coconut, and get to that.
As they watch it in real time.
Getting a child up and off the couch and an active participant in the educational experience just naturally leads to deeper engagement. They're aware and focused on the educational content.
Within the show, we have a series of interactive activities, including finding hidden objects that are embedded in the video. So we use the existing the existing Sesame and National Geographic footage, and we have the ability to layer another layer of video on top of that, which allows us to create moments of interactivity. Like, for example, hey, I'm watching a documentary about grizzly bears. I want to be able to collect this awesome snapshot of the grizzly bear for my collection. I can do that, point to the screen, take the snapshot, it gets sent to my album. I can share my album online, etc., etc. So you can imagine transforming this into a real family experience, transforming the living room and using the last bastion of family interaction or family action, which is watching television, into a real interactive experience, or a real playful experience.
Can be what kids come home and turn on to have this interactive experience as a family. We look for fun excitement through our information, our content, the way we present it. Games add another layer that just amp it up. It's a way to really get excited about our world.
When you excite kids about their world, they become the stewards of the planet. They then care about the planet. The whole point is to make them excited about their world and take ownership over it.
This is the first time we're taking our show and laying on top of interactive experience in a way that I'm not sure anybody else has done yet. That's really exciting. We can bring an enormous amount of...
Rather than learning about the animal and their ecosystem, why not be the animal and interact in their ecosystem? Why not take advantage of the whole body interaction to understand the relationships, the ecosystemic relationships between the animal and the world around it, rather than just read that on a book?
And excitement about the real world. And these two things together provide...
So that is the idea, which I couldn't show it to you, but later on, if we have a chance this afternoon or this evening, I want to set up the demo, and you guys can play it. It's always better to play it. And then the last thing, this got a little squished. The last thing I wanted to talk about was the work that we're doing with self-expression. So if ultimate accessibility and the interactive format on traditional science content are possible, and we can marry them into a meaningful experience, how can we take that to the next level? Well, the way that we're doing it is by creating tools that take that accessibility and allow kids to use interactive formats, particularly games, to express themselves and to express ideas about the world. And the way that we're doing this is using a product called Kodu Game Lab. Kodu, how many of you are familiar with Kodu or have heard of Kodu? So Kodu, along the vein of GameStar Mechanic, which is another awesome product out there. It's a tool that allows kids to use agents, virtual agents, in a 3D world to create their own games. Not only can they easily drag and drop a character and paint the 3D world in real time, but they can open the brains of those characters and program them to create new behaviors and to give new behaviors. Kodu has been such a powerful influence in the classroom and outside of the classroom that a few months back we had an 11-year-old Hannah Wyman, a student from Massachusetts, create a game about environmental science that won her an invitation to the National Science Fair at the White House. So President Obama got to play her game and feel humbled by the fact that that generation knows how to make games and he couldn't even begin to think about how to start. But the powerful, I think the most powerful component of this is seeing when you actually see a child explaining the learning that took place when they created this. So this little video is an excerpt of an interview that a local television station in Michigan did of a science camp that I was running when I was a faculty member at Michigan State last year. It was called The Science and Art of Game Design, and we tasked children with making games that would teach any science subject or any math subject to other kids. What this particular child made, he decided to use fractions as the theme for making this game. And this is the conversation that ensued.
Actually, in GameStar Mechanic, I did earn a golden Game Star because I got a top-rated game.
So talking about
But yeah, I don't have a badge. The closest thing to a badge is this Pokewalker, but enough about that. Subject of the interview.
Did you want to show us a little bit of your fraction game or something that you've made so far?
Sure, I'm not completely. So far what I'm doing is I'm just pasting these and then I'm just cloning them just to get 20 apples. But yeah, I'll just show you what it would basically look like. So you're controlling this guy and you obviously not the fastest. Hey, so he says, hey you, yeah you. This is one of those games when you can't see or hear the character you're playing as speak. I just work on the other guys. Stop interrupting, just how you're feeling. Hungry? For how many apples out of 20? 1/2, is that it? Yes? Well good, just eat that much then. Ah, you glitch. Ah. I gotta fix this. Come on. I gotta fix this guy's programming first. Obviously.
So he immediately knows where the problem is.
Okay.
Opens it up, goes and identifies what the problem is, sets a simple solution.
There.
He's gonna do it, and it's fixed the problem. What is a wonderful thing about examples like this one is precisely that it shows the power of ultimate accessibility to engage kids in learning not only about traditional school subjects, but about the world around them. Using the tool, using the computer, using games as tools to think can empower our children to explore concepts way beyond their imagination. We're coming to a world where the separation between school knowledge and the outside knowledge is anathema to the way that people are functioning. If we live in a world where people are always connected, there is no point in separating valuable knowledge and knowledge that we know will move us forward from pop culture, from Britney Spears, from the latest and greatest pop star. One of the biggest inspirations to me recently was the work that Dean Kamen is doing with the first robotics league. And one of the things that he said is, we're living in a world where technology has become so advanced that this young generation, Gen Y and Gen Z, are growing up and looking at it as if it were magic. I push a button and something magically happens on screen. But very seldom do they stop to think of all the infrastructure that is underneath it, and all the work that was done to put that infrastructure in place. With tools like Kodu, we're trying to take them to a place where we can actually begin to show them that under those magical worlds that they play in, there's actually a lot of science and a lot of technology, and that stuff is cool. And that is as cool or even cooler than whatever it is that you find out there in the social channel and in the scene.
Alex, my question is about the premise of your talk, which is disruptive in education. We all know the information society is changing things, and the ability to access information for children far surpasses anything that anybody in this room had growing up. So if the premise is the ability to process information becomes more valuable than rote learning of it, how do we disrupt education in a manner that still gives children developmental critical thinking skills and a grounding in processing as in some formal educational setting, while then preparing them to collaborate and crowdsource their strengths and weaknesses in a collaborative environment? How do you still maintain an educational balance between learning how to think critically and then becoming a processor of information?
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think it has to do, there's multiple approaches in my mind to attacking that problem. But if I had to pinpoint one big strategy, it is how do we put an influx of valuable knowledge, of knowledge that we know as a society is fundamental to our success in the future, into popular culture. Because we spend a lot of time entertaining ourselves to death. That's amazing. It's awesome. As an advocate of games, I also have to take responsibility for the other side of games, which is very often we design experiences that are so sticky and so awesomely addictive that we don't give people time to think with them. I grew up, with games, and I am a living example that when you play hours and hours and hours of games, you can still get a job. However, I actually had the opportunity and the blessing of growing up with games that actually allowed me to think and reflect. And if there's something that has concerned me with the trend in games in the last decade, is that we've moved towards really fast-paced, bite-sized experiences. Very similar to what is happening with social media, very similar to what is happening in Facebook. If somebody tells you that they read their news and that they understand the news by reading them on Twitter, you know there's something wrong. If they tell you that they vote for a political candidate because they read the Twitter feeds, you should be concerned. And you should be concerned because there are certain things, certain concepts that it takes time and patience to develop that knowledge. In my mind, that's one of those. The other way is we need to rethink what it means to be a teacher in the 21st century. I don't mean be a learner, I mean being a teacher. Because teachers are one of our most valuable resources and one of the resources that we have completely wasted over the last 20 years. We've bashed them, we've put tremendous constraints on them, we've made them feel guilty for all the failures of the school system. And the one thing that we have not done is support them and teach them technology. You have no idea how many times I've entered to do research in schools. And I find that the teachers don't even have access to the wireless password at the school. And they have to go ask permission to some guy in a closet. I call it the tyranny of the tech guy. Who sometimes have barely completed a GED and has to tell them how to do technology. I think it's a disgrace. that we're doing that to our teachers. It's a disgrace because they are the ones preparing the future.
Sorry, Alex, we have a question back here. It's very anxious.
You know, I'm looking at Kodu and I'm thinking about logo.
Yeah.
The little turtle that used to make pretty pinwheels. I learned a lot from that piece of software, but you know, what I'm curious now that I'm older and focused on this industry is what kind of pushback are you getting from school systems as far as adopting it? I mean, it's clear that there is some adoption there, but can you talk specifically about some of the hurdles that you've come across?
Yes. The biggest pushback I think we're getting, and the way that I see the biggest barrier to overcome is bureaucracy. End of deal. Because we're still working on a system where school district levels mandate stuff from the top down. But the stuff that they mandate is still incredibly outdated. How many of you here are school teachers? Get a sense. Or have been school teachers. How many, do you happen to know how many school districts in the nation are teaching engineering? Engineering courses for kids? One, in Austin, Texas. Pushed by the University of Texas, by a group of faculty members. It took 6 universities to support one school district. There's something wrong with that picture.
Last question.
This is a little bit of an open-ended question, but my wife, things like Logo, which I grew up with, and tools like this now, my experience has been for kids who have a predilection for that kind of logical problem solving thinking, they're great tools, but the kind of everybody a coder movement, my wife, who is a psychologist, going into psychology, likes to point out that we seem to be neglecting the left side of the bell curve that would have been going into factory jobs, into agrarian jobs in the last century, and are not going to become software engineers. It just isn't in their predilections.
Yeah.
How can we serve them better?
Yeah. The way that I think we can serve them better is, and this actually, that's a question that I think is far more fundamental to the future of our economy than anything else. When you think about, okay, so in this day and age where we are in this rapid flow of information, we tend to put so much emphasis on that rapid flow that we forget the more important information, and those are the huge trends that are happening in our demographics. In the United States, how many of you are 65 or older? Congratulations, you're the fastest growing population segment in the nation. Starting 2011, you are the fastest growing group in the nation. Every other group is under replacement rate. What is happening is we're facing a true crisis. Within the next 20 years, we're going to face a massive crisis of a very small workforce, a very large retiring population, and a very large undereducated young class. And what that will do, what that small workforce will do, is it will force whoever's president at that point, if you think Obama's having it hard right now, whoever's president at that moment is going to be in a horrible conundrum. Because there's going to be one of 3 possible options. One, you massively increase taxes on the small workforce. You do that, that's a recipe for disaster. 2, you reduce entitlements. You're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid on people, on a group that is overrepresented, and that vote more than the regular group. Probably impossible. The 3rd one is you open the borders to immigration. What are you going to do, even if you open the borders to immigration, if you don't have a skilled workforce to satisfy those jobs? Because at the end of the day, all this infrastructure that we're creating, yeah, you know, we do innovation and whatnot. What we forget is that 80% of life is maintenance. Somebody has to do the maintenance of those systems. And I mean it in the most earnest and serious way. Today, in the United States, there are jobs that people can take that are technical jobs that pay better than professional jobs. Because there is such a need for technical work. And yet, we live in the mythos of everybody has to be a professional. Everybody wants it. Why? Because it's driven by a particular consumer segment that we're trying to target. But we've seen it with ourselves. I mean, you know, the Heritage Foundation came with a report not that long ago that showed that the poor classes in America are complaining too much. They have Xboxes at home. They're not poor. Yes, our box is $200. The comparative level of technology, services, etc., of the top 1% is, the gap is massive. So it's not about what you have or what you don't have. It's about the power that you have to participate and have a voice in society at the end of the day. Those jobs are still going to be there. The needs are still going to be there. As more and more people retire, there's going to be need for those services. But we're not training the population to do that. How do you fix that? The big E word. Education. Education, education, education. The one thing that we're not investing in right now. So, hope that answers that.
Well, I'm unhappy.
Sorry, I will play.